Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Foley is Pod. And of course, we couldn't do it without the hardcore legend himself. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mick Foley. Mick, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. I'm about as far away from the United States as you could possibly be. Right here in Melbourne, Australia. We just finished our Australia leg of the tour. And now I have this day off, and then tomorrow we head to New Zealand, where I've never been or performed before.
Wow, a first. That's pretty rare for you, right? You go somewhere you've never been.
Yeah. I love Australia. They've always been supportive. Last night during the meet and greet, I met at least a dozen people who've been to every event I've done. 3 different tours, and also went to the promotional tour I did for WWE in, I think, 2001. So these are people, some really diehard fans. They know their stuff. They're passionate about it. A little too passionate about their sports once in a while, if I may express some fisticuffs that went on at the Foley show last night. Are you okay with that? Near fisticuffs. So definitely upending the harmonious nature of the meet and greet. And luckily, this was at a club that it was a top comedy club in all of Australia, the Comics Lounge, and they diffused the situation. It would have been easy. I heard some of the things that were going on, and it kind of threw things off for about 10 minutes because everyone else is in this joyous mood, and these two guys really want to go at each other. So afterwards, I said, what the heck happened? Here, of all things, the two guys were best friends, but they had attended an AFL game where they are bitter rivals. They got into a fist fight before the show over the AFL game. That's Australian rules football game. They got so sick of each other that they decided they needed to cut the line for the VIPs, which you don't do. And we're demanding they get in early. So this is the type of situation, I think, where they will regret their actions.
Yeah.
But it was two best friends getting in one fist fight on the precipice of a second fist fight because one's team had won and the other one did not. And so because they were sick of each other and did not want to stand in line together anymore, they demanded to go up to the front. We're not allowed. And a fisticuffs nearly took place. Just a little, I'd say it's a little bit ridiculous. That's the point where you're taking your sports a little too seriously.
Where was Yerpel when we needed her?
Yerpel could have diffused that situation. Anyway.
No problem.
Yeah. And also the reason she went with Yerpel is to honor her purple belt in Jeet Kune Do. I just made that up completely.
Well, something you didn't make up is, man, you're doing a lot of good while you're down yonder, as we say here in Alabama. I saw one heck of a donation made the other day. Tell everybody what's going on.
Yeah. The first you have to keep in mind, the Australian dollar, so that's about 70 cents on the U.S. dollar. So we raised $10,000 in 7 shows, auctioning off the shirts off my back. These are the flannels and the T-shirts. Last night hurt me a little bit because I'd been without my bag for 10 days. I showed up in Australia basically with the clothes on my back, and I had to end up getting another couple pairs of underwear. I had to start using from the Foley, the wanted dead pile. And so when my shirts finally arrived, I was so happy to have 2 shirts that my daughter Noelle had given me. One being Marv from Home Alone, who I will argue is up there with the most extreme hardcore legends we've seen on screen, and every bit the menacing monster that Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers is. Just my humble opinion, because he took such unparalleled punishment. So I love that shirt, and also a shirt that she gave me that says "Be kind" on it. And I'd put that up on social media, so I think people knew I liked it. But that's what I was wearing. And I was rehearsing for my duet of Summer Nights to honor Olivia Newton-John. Because we don't just we don't just talk about graphic injuries. We cover the classics, and the promoter said he is 4:30 in the morning 2 days ago, and he's got no sleep. He's cranky. I'm operating on no sleep. Those are the worst days. You just try to get through them. You get to the next city. You have no sleep. You try to pull it together and be a professional. And at 4:30 in the morning, he's got his bag, and from behind, he hears me going, doom, da-doom, da-doom, da-da-da. So I loved Olivia Newton-John, and I just had this idea that I wanted to do something to honor her above and beyond explaining to anybody who gets tongue-tied, at the meet and greet table that, hey, I know how you feel because I met Olivia Newton-John, which is a true story. And my wife marveled how I couldn't put more than a couple words together. But anyway, we've been doing the shirt donations, and they've been going for over $1,000 Australian a night. And then on consecutive nights, the one guy who's rude and selfish by yelling stuff out, the guy who I've got to stop. And I think you've seen me do this, Conrad. I don't browbeat them. I don't make them part of the show. I don't try to get a laugh. I just point out that everybody has made a sacrifice in money and time. Some people have gotten babysitters. I'm pretty sure if we asked everyone here, not a single soul would say they came to hear you. And that's a little bit humbling, right? Like, it's not funny. It's just, you're kind of shaming them into behaving. The second guy was even worse, where I had to take away his beverage.
Oh, wow.
And you do not, at this state, you do not need to be drinking this. He had what looked to me like to be a big pint of Guinness. So I thought, okay, I'll take a drink. I haven't had have a little swig on stage in a couple of years. And as soon as I take a swig, I'm like, that's not Guinness. That's a really strong Jack and Coke filled to the top of like a 32-ounce glass. And he tried to sneak in another one, and I took that from him too, which point it looked like a hurt kid. But on both those nights when it came to the the shirt off my back auction, these guys are throwing up their hands and going with the biggest bids of the whole tour.
Wow.
So the first guy was $1,500. The second guy he went $2,500. And then so I take off my stuff and I come back and I've got that, that button down Hawaiian Santa shirt that I've worn on the show one or two times. And he asked me if I will sell that for $500. So yes, I will. So look, don't judge a book by its cover. He's probably a good guy who had a little bit too much to drink, but in the end, he made a good decision. It's going to help out a lot of wildlife. So I've lost my phone. I don't know if you know that. I highly advise not leaving your phone behind in the car service in Chicago when you go to Australia. Also, you were there. You were on hand when I had the Twitter hack.
Yes,
and that got resolved. But then because the Twitter was hacked, now Gmail decides that they need to make sure it's really me. And I proceed to fail my own security questions twice, and they cut me off. So now I'm going to Australia, as far as you be around the globe. I don't have a phone. I don't have an email. They lose my bag for 11 days. I just got it back yesterday. I've got the shirts on my back. It turns out the 3X underwear that someone buys for you in Australia is not 3X underwear in Australia. So I'm being pinched in ways that I haven't been pinched in years. But nonetheless, having an amazing time and raising money. And, oh, my goodness, people buy merchandise here. It's on a level that I've never seen. And the shows are going really well. I'd say the one I did in Melbourne on Saturday night was among the top 5 shows I've done in terms of just enjoying myself and having amazing reactions.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, congratulations. Yeah. I'm glad you're having fun, and it's pretty awesome to hear. And literally, it's Murphy's Law type situation. Everything's gone wrong. You're still pretty positive about it. I got the hit up from our mutual friend Barry, who called me over and over and over, and he never does that. But I was thinking it was back to back to back. And when I finally get him, he's like, Mick's lost his phone and he's locked out of his email and he's in Australia. And I'm like, okay, how do I communicate with him? He's like, I don't know. But when you get something from him, it's really him. I'm like, okay, got it. I appreciate the heads
up. It was Olivia Newton-John getting me through. Whenever you're down in life, this goes for everyone, not just you, Conrad. Just think yourself, boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. So
I love it.
We did the duet last night, and it just so happened that the manager of the club knew a burlesque dancer. She showed up. It was like showed up 5 minutes before I went on stage, and I said, "Oh, hi, thanks for being here. You want to sit down?" And she sat down. We had the laptop. We went on one knee each. We went over the song once, and I was like, "She's got some pipes." And she went out there and crushed it, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and I think if people know that I'm enjoying myself, they're going to enjoy themselves.
100%, totally agree.
Yeah,
and I hope you guys enjoy yourselves today, because we're going to be doing something we haven't talked about a lot, something kind of recent relative to some of our other topics. This is the build for Vengeance, aka Night of Champions in 2000.
yeah.
So about 15 years ago or so, and you've been involved with WWE programming since around the WrestleMania time, where you were hired back after getting fired the summer before, following the feud with Flair and the whole kiss my ass stuff with Vince and Melina, which I'm sure we'll get into the time. But you were away all this time because of your work on your newest book, Hardcore Diaries, and all the promotional stuff that, was involved with that. What was your contractual status with the company at this time, to the best of your recollection?
I think I had signed, which I thought was a heck of a contract. It's actually the contract I encouraged Jericho to sign. It's a part-time contract that pays you almost like a full-timer. And now, since then, there have been a lot of guys who come in as part-timers who have done really well. Jericho made the determination he wanted to be, that lack of a better word, all in. Like he appreciated what I had done, but he wanted to be a full-time wrestler. But I think coming off, you have to go back into where I've left WWE under less than ideal circumstances. So from 2003, for a couple of years, 2003, 2004, I went from having not done any wrestling shows whatsoever because I wasn't contractually allowed to. Mr. McMahon was nice enough to let me out of my contract a year early at my request, with the caveat that I could not do anything in wrestling for that final year. And I was okay with that. And then even for months to follow, I would be asked, hey, someone wants to do a signing, how can they get in touch with you? I just say, they can't. I'm not really interested in doing them. And then when I did start doing them, I would do them strictly for charity, for the Marty Lyons Foundation, for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And then I did an independent show where I was a referee. And I realized that, having some fun and walking away with a healthy payoff, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
And I went a different direction. I went from doing none to being like, you have money, I'll be there. And it got to where I was working with, I don't want to say they were shady and that they were bad people, but they were people who did not have the finances to be putting on the shows. And a couple checks bounced. And a turning point for me, Conrad, was when I get to this event outside of Chicago. It's in the back of a baseball, like a baseball lesson academy type place. And it's okay if your baseball academy is in the back of a shopping center, because people who want to take the lessons will find it. But that doesn't mean it's the place to run a wrestling show, where not a soul can see it when they pass by. All of these independent shows are limited in what they can do to promote. So I walk in and there's about 25 people in there. And I just said to the guy, I said, how are you going to pay me? And he said, we're going to pay you off the gate. And I looked around and I said, we both know there's not enough money here to pay me. And then the guy got a little concerned. He said, I don't know what to do. The only thing I could think of is to drive to my grandmother's house and get the money from her. And I said, we need to take that ride. Like, I was as close to being a gangster as I've ever been, as I pressured this guy to drive to his grandmother's house and give me a sweaty wad of bills. And it was on the way home.
Whoa,
driving.
Yeah. Not on the way home. I got to know, you go into grandma's house, you reach,
I did.
You reach in the pants, you pull the sock out, and you ask grandma hard way or easy way, right? It's something like that.
Basically, yeah. And then what I thought was the strangest thing is she was a little bit short, so she offered to give me some Bluechews. And I didn't know what they were. And she said, they're like a hot tag for your wiener. So
it is indeed. By the way, this is sponsored by Bluechew, and I can't imagine what grandma, she was in for the ride of her life. You know, Mrs. Foley's baby boy made her an honest woman today.
Conrad, I heard that at least 3 times a day at every meet and greet. A hot tag, like a hot tag for your wiener. So people were like, they would say, I love the show. And then what they would go on to prove they love the show is saying, it's like a hot tag for your wiener. I was like, you have been listening. That's right. So this also followed there. If you were following wrestling lore at this time, there was a wrestling convention in Indianapolis. The promoter picked me up while the show was going on. And I said, how's it going? He said, oh man, it's going amazing. When he knows it's not going amazing.
Right.
Like, I believe he's lying to me, hoping that it, that it becomes
into existence. Yeah.
Yes. He's speaking success into existence. And when I get there, there's only like 100 fans, and there's just about as many wrestlers. Got to be 50 wrestlers. He's clearly overbooked this thing. Nobody's doing it. I had a little bit of a line, and I may have been one of only 2 people with a line. And so when I wanted to talk to him about the likelihood of any of these guys getting paid, he could not be reached because he was locked up in a room, curled up in the fetal position.
Oh, no.
And I just started thinking, like, I don't need to be a party to this type of thing. The guy did go home to his mom's house and wrote checks on his mom's checkbook. Everyone got paid. None of the checks bounced, but it obviously appeared a little dicey. And I remember thinking to myself when I was driving home that despite the fact, I'd left under less than ideal circumstances with WWE, I thought, I may have even said this out loud, but I know the thought was, I know a guy in Connecticut whose checks never bounce.
Yep.
And that's when I called him up with the idea of doing like a 3-year deal that called for 3 matches a year. And he went for it. And it was under that contract that I did the WrestleMania match with Rick and Batista and Randy, and then the next big follow-up match with Randy. And so this match, 2007, fell under that contract. It was one of 3 matches I had to do in 2007 to fulfill that contract.
Well, that's a great story. And on a separate note, I want to thank you for being so gracious with my grandma at StarCast when you had to go visit her so we can settle up. No, sincerely, I do want to give a shout out to Bluechew, longtime sponsor here on the program. This show and Mix Wiener are both brought to you by Bluechew. Bluechew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready for that ever elusive run-in. The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. No awkward visits to the doctor's office or grandma's house or awkward conversations. No waiting in line at the pharmacy. Bluechew's tablets show up right to your door. They're prepared and shipped directly to your door in a discreet package. Oh, by the way, made right here in the USA, but I bet they even work on those kangaroos down there. I don't know for sure, but if you
so what you say, we've just crossed the line here.
We have.
Previously, it was a hot tag for your wiener, presumably for somebody involved in the tag.
Yes.
Now you're just advocating, take it for a run-in. Just get involved in a situation that is not even your own. I'm gonna say, hey, that's Conrad Thompson. That's not me. I don't approve of run-ins unless it's agreed upon, ahead of time.
Hypothetically, in this scenario, when you arrive back here in American soil after a long tour of duty, and you finally pull into the driveway, and Mrs. Foley's there, I'm going to assume when you were a couple exits back, you would have started chomping on a Bluechew, so you're ready for a run-in. She doesn't know what time you're telling.
I gotcha. Okay,
we put the theme music, and here we come, and it's more than a baseball bat. It's more than a barbed wire or something. We got something to contend with here.
Look, spontaneity is a great thing in a relationship, but I'm 57. My wife's 62. We need to precondition we need to go over the rules of combat, settle on them a long time in advance. And
that's a shame. Here you have to put it out like that. I thought back in your day, y'all called it in the ring. I'm just so disappointed.
Back in the day, right? Back in the day, but now in order to get my high spots in, we have to have some type of a rough draft of what we're going to be going through.
Well, if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, Bluechew can help.
Yes, I can.
Special deal for our listeners. Try Bluechew free when you use our promo code Foley at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. The promo code is Foley. To receive your first month free, visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Bluechew for sponsoring this awesome segment on this fantastic podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
So let's talk about getting back into ring shape. When you're trying to, I'm making tours and for my book and trying to promote that thing. And I know I've got a handful of matches to do, and now I'm going to be headlining a pay-per-view. Is there a regiment or do you think, hey, it's 5 guys, maybe it won't be that bad? Or what's the thinking?
Well, in this case, there's a combination of both. I had taken quite a bit of pride into getting into ring shape before these comeback matches. I mean, I think you can look at the way I looked when I took on Randy Orton at Backlash and see that, okay, this guy's lost a lot of weight. Yep. It wasn't just a diet. I mean, I really had 5-6 months to work on it. I went down from 330 to 260. It was the lightest I'd been in a long time. And I really think that the work showed. Unfortunately, in 2007, and I'm going to blame this on Al Snow. Al Snow was a practitioner of something called 100 rep training. And the theory behind it is you would start out with light weights and you continue with the light weights, especially on something like a leg press, where you start burning out and you start feeling the lactic acid build up. But because the weights are light, you can still kind of gut through it and you can get to your 100 reps, but the last 30 or 40 reps are going to be excruciating to where you got a major burn and your legs are a different way. You train your legs a different way than you did your upper body. You could train them to exhaustion. You could do more reps. I mean, it was never a textbook example. And now the science is different than it was when I was reading up on that stuff in the 80s and the 90s. But the idea is you can fight through the pain because of the limited amount of weights. And I would get off that weight machine. This is one of 5 or 6 pieces that we had brought to our garage on Long Island after my wife and I moved from Florida. The State Department needed the land, and we gracefully eased out of the gym business. We did have a good gym, a good functioning, cool gym in Navarre, Florida. I wanted something to be able to fall back on, and then the business just took off. And I was like, I don't think we're going to need something to fall back on, like if we're wise with our money. But it was a great place for people to work out. We were in between an Air Force base, a Marine base, and a Navy base. And so most of the constituents were people who had bases, who had equipment and gyms on base, but they liked it. It had a good atmosphere. It was a really cool place to work out. It was really unique. But when the State Department bought our gym, we donated a lot of the equipment to a local YMCA. We donated a lot of equipment to I'm trying to think of the name of the place. In Long Island City, there was a Borden Avenue Veterans Residence House. So it's kind of like for homeless veterans. So they pretty much had a full-scale gym overnight. And I held on to maybe 5 or 6 pieces of equipment, including this leg press. And you get off that leg press and you can barely walk, right? Because your legs are so sore. But one day I'm doing it, and around the 20th rep, I feel something go down like my lower back. And it feels like someone has found a way to tap into the inside of my leg. It is pouring scalding water down my right leg. So I have injured my back, but I continue to do the 60 reps. And when I'm walking up the hill in my driveway, I thought, I'm effed. You know, if I was another guy, I would drop that F-bomb and I'd be justified in doing it. And by the time I got to the house, I realized I'm in deep trouble. So I went to the post office to try to drop off something, and I found myself shuffling back and forth on my feet during the 10 minutes I was there just to take the excruciating pain off my lower back. I got home, probably sped home. By the time I was 5 minutes in, I had 3 or 4 drinks, like 2, 3 beers, a couple shots, and my wife went, "What's going on?" I was like, "Glad I'm in incredible pain." And the person I felt worst for in the scenario is my daughter, Noelle. 2007, she would have been 14. She was under the impression her dad was some type of tough guy. And now I'm reduced to helplessness to the point where the guy, they have to take me to the hospital laying down in the back. We had an SUV at the time. And so I go to the hospital, and I can tell they're skeptical because pain medication was a real issue at that time, right? Guys creating reasons to come in there, people hitting themselves in the thumb with a hammer, going in looking for pain medication. So the guy says, "Okay, what is your pain on a level of 1 to 10?" I said, 10. He goes, no, what is your, he looks at me real cynically. I said, it's a 10. And then he goes to start asking it again. I said, let me put it this way. When I was in Germany in 1994 and lost my ear, I was asked what my level of pain was, and I said it was a 4. So when I'm telling you this is a 10, I'm telling you this is the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. And the guy gave me like Tylenol, and then misdiagnosed me. He said, you have a pulled muscle. And I said, with all due respect, I've had pulled muscles. This is not a pulled muscle. And so I went on my own, and I had a MRI done that was just disastrous, just freaking disastrous. I remember talking to the expert in Pittsburgh about the diagnosis. He goes, it's a bad MRI. And I said, well, what is it? He goes, it's a bad MRI. And it was one of those, you get what you pay for. This is, this is my bills coming up, time to be paid. And I didn't realize that pain was going to be quite that steep. And I'd say one of the most down moments, I'll go with the 2 downers, and then we'll try to get happy here in a little bit, was when I had a surgery set in Pittsburgh. And then the guy called up. He goes, listen, I don't think we can help you. He said, you've just got too many issues. You've got the neurological issues. You've got the structural issues. There was another issue. He said, there's no guarantee that anything we do will help at all. And so you could say, and then depression set in. The other time was when I went to get my, so we're jumping ahead from 2007 to 2011. And in between, I had the TNA stint. But when I did come back to WWE, I had the full physical done. And I measure in at 6'1.25". And I knew I'd been a legit 6'4".
Oh,
so I was really baffled by that, right? And I said, I used to be 6'4". And okay, and you got another couple hours of tests going. He takes the X-ray of my back, and I see that my back is pulling. It's just hooking to the left. It's just making a turn. And I said, what the heck is that? He said, that's acquired scoliosis.
oh,
That is the gradual bending of your spine from favoring injuries. And I said, would that account for the 2 3/4 inches that I lost? And he said, absolutely. So that night I drive home. My daughter's out by the mailbox when I arrive, and she looks at me with her eyes bright, like, she nods her head like, did they go good? And all I did is I just shook my head. I just shook my head. I thought, what have I done to myself? Like, this is even more than I bargained for. I've got a spine that's inoperable. I've got, scoliosis making me 2.5 inches, 2 3/4 inches shorter. There's no help for me whatsoever until DDP yoga came along.
really?
Yeah. The strengthening, the lengthening. I also had a personal trainer who I'd known in high school who got me started moving. She said, I'll get you moving, but you got to be able to put in the work. Got in the pool. This is when I had that other dramatic weight loss from 338 to 288 by the time I got into the ring for WrestleMania 2016. And then I went on to drop another 50. And now I've put all that back. So I've got to find a way to get back into that same mindset where I'm going to get out there every single day and find something to do and move, even if it's in the pool, even if it's combining DDP motions in the pool, because COVID kicked my butt in such a major way. And I was just so shocked to see how much strength I'd lost, going from being a 45 push-up guy to a 3 push-up guy.
Wow.
Like dramatic loss of strength. So if there's ever a time when someone out there has wanted to kick my butt, now's probably the time, because I don't have a lot in the way of strength these days. But I'll get it back. Strength of character, yes, Conrad. Strength of body, I've been stronger in the past. I realize we've gone on a segue, but this does give you an idea of where I was in 2007. So I was not properly trained.
Right.
And yet I was very grateful for the 5-man format, which would not exploit my weaknesses the way that a singles match would.
Okay, guys, let's run a timeout right now and tell you about something that has changed my life. I'm talking about ChiliSleep. Science has told us that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering our core body temperature. And I guess I kind of knew that my whole life. I've always had a ceiling fan over my bed. I've always cranked down the AC before I went to bed, but ChiliSleep really leveled it up, man. Not only do I think it's just more logical, like I don't need my laundry room to be cold. I don't need my dining room to be cold. I wanted my bed to be cold. Buddy, ChiliSleep is like a smart thermostat for your mattress. ChiliSleep makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions, and they've helped me improve my entire well-being. I know I'm getting better rest. I'm dreaming for the first time in my life. Bright, vivid, colorful dreams. And also, too, how about this? I wake up and I don't feel tired. I used to have a napping couch in my office. Everybody knew after lunch, 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm going to crash for 15 minutes and then go attack the second half of my day. I don't need it anymore because I'm getting good quality sleep at night, and I give all the credit for that to the Ooler, which is what ChiliSleep makes. They also make a cube sleep system, but I've got an Ooler by my bed. You need one too. It's a hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress topper. It fits over your existing mattress to provide you your ideal sleep temperature. This is not a water bed. Let me explain. There's a little unit you put by your bed. You put a little bit of water in it. You pair your phone with this unit, and now your phone is like a remote control for your bed. You can even automate it. My wife wants to get into a warm bed, but she wants it to cool her off during the night so she doesn't get all hot and sweaty, but then warm her up to wake up. Not me, man. I want my bed to be cold when I get in it and let me sleep cold all the night through. I do not toss and turn. I don't fidget and flip around the pillow. I don't kick the covers. I just can't hype this enough, guys. This is a real part of my life. Just last week, I went to the beach. I took a freaking ChiliSleep with me. I travel with this thing. It's changed my life. Imagine if you could, get the help you need to fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. ChiliSleep has done that for me. They'll do it for you too. Head over to chilisleep.com/Foley to learn more. Save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Mick Foley listeners and only for a limited time. That's ChiliSleep, sleep.com/Foley to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up feeling refreshed every day. I want to remind everybody this 5 ways between yourself, King Booker, John Cena, Bobby Lashley, and Randy Orton for the WWE title. I mean, pretty impressive that you haven't exactly been a regular performer, and now here you are in a main event for a title.
Right.
It's got to be pretty cool to know that, hey man, there's still a lot of faith and confidence in me.
Yeah, it was a fun concept for the idea because every one of the 5 participants was a former WWE champion. The one thing in the course of the booking, the week before I had this match, I had a match with Umaga where he basically squashed me.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not somebody who cares that much about wins and losses as long as they make sense. That one did not seem to make sense a week before the pay-per-view, because I think if anything, the fans should have been given the idea that, hey, this guy's been out of it. He's a danger at any time. He could win this thing. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand building up Umaga and getting him a win, but I did not think that was the time to be doing it, especially with a guy going into a pay-per-view main event the next week.
As you said, it's the go-home edition of Monday Night Raw. It's in Richmond, Virginia, I believe, and it goes like 2 minutes. And then 6 days later, here you guys are at the pay-per-view in Houston, the Toyota Center. I do want to ask, because let's just call it like it is. You were a quote-unquote part-time guy here.
Yeah.
And now you're going to be coming in and taking one of those elusive main event spots. And there's been some guys who've had some rumblings over the years that they don't think that's fair that The Rock comes back and he gets a WrestleMania main event or whatever. And you've always been the ultimate brother amongst the boys. Chat me up. Did you feel any of that pushback, or is it different because, well, you're you?
Well, I asked Edge about that when we were working in 2006. And he goes, Mick, he said, that doesn't apply to you.
Yeah.
He says, what the guys have problems with is someone coming in for 1 or 2 weeks and capturing a spot. He goes, you come in for 10 or 12 weeks and you build programs that leave people better off than they were. And he goes, and ultimately you don't win these matches,
Yeah.
I always try to leave people better off than they were. And I would never propose an angle that did not leave somebody better off. I guess the one where I went to Vince and said I'd like to win the Royal Rumble, challenge both champions because I wasn't on a brand, win a 3-way dance and become a WWE undisputed champion. That was kind of all for me. And he shot that down in record time. He just said, literally, he didn't even think about it, Conrad. He just said, I have no interest whatsoever in doing that. And I said, okay, I've got this idea for me and Randy Orton. And then that idea with Randy Orton went on to be the best thing. I understand from the boys' perspective because I'm still one of the boys. Yeah. You want spots on the card. But when I come up, when I do these things, meet and greets, I'm asked the 3 most common things I'm asked about are Hell in a Cell, by far and away Hell in a Cell, Rock and Sock Connection, and the Rumble where I appeared as 3 different characters.
Yep.
So in that case, probably there were some people going, this guy's getting 3 spots. He's costing 2 people their spots. But guess what? Those 2 people would have been forgotten instantly. And instead, WWE, who is in the business of creating memories, came up with something that people talk about to this day that really made them happy. So, you have to find a balance. I think there are some pay-per-views that rely too heavily on part-timers who may not have the same interest of coming in and making the world a slightly better place for mankind. But I do think there's a time and a place for returning guys to come back. Sometimes you need them at the top of the card. That would speak more to WWE's ability to create stars, but I think they're getting better at that. Too much is not good. None at all is even worse.
I'm curious, after you've been out for a while, you're not a regular part of the crew. And I know that at times you described yourself as a bit of a loner, but you did have some pals that you would travel with from time to time.
Yeah.
Who are you hanging with here in 07, or do you feel like an outsider?
Well, I mean, I was not an outsider when I would get into the dressing room, but because I'd be flying in while the guys were already on the road, anytime after 2000, was beginning in 2000 when I was WWE commissioner, I was joining the rest of the crew en route. And so I was able to rent my own cars. The company would take care of my hotels. This is where they wanted me to stay at the TV hotels. And I'm like, I just want to stay I'm a 3-star man now, right? I'm no longer the 1-star man. I'm a 3-star man. But I don't like a big foyer. I don't want a bar. I just want a place where I can go in and check in and have a comfortable bed. And so I would ask them if I could get my own hotel and then submit the bills to the company. And I was always bad on that. I'm not a good organizational guy. And so I would usually end up handing them my receipts after about 6 months, and there would be hundreds of them. But I was used to traveling on my own. So I would see the guys and I really enjoy being around everybody when I got there. But I was on my own, as far as hotels and cars went. And I liked it that way.
It's a pretty short build we've got here. You're going to pop up just 2 weeks before the pay-per-view. You return on July 11th, 2007. That's a draft episode of Monday Night Raw in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And everyone remembers this episode for when Vince McMahon blew himself up in a limousine, and what I believe was also Vince McMahon Appreciation Night. What do you remember of this night?
I was really upset about it. I was upset about it. I know once we talk about the match, we'll jump forward to that next day, which was one of the most tragic days in wrestling history. But before those events, and we're talking about the Benoit events, began to unfold, I had about a 45-minute talk/shouting match with Mr. McMahon because I hated that angle. Because at the time I was doing quite a bit with injured service members, and I was always working with kids who were facing challenges, and including imminent deaths. And I remember him. It was crazy because going back to the episode where I did kiss Vince's butt, right, following the I Quit match with Rick. We're live. We're backstage, but it's a live interview, so we can't cut. And I called him Vince, and he said, "What did you call me?" And I thought, this is a trick question. I said, "Vince?" And he looked at me. I didn't realize that you were supposed to refer to him as Mr. McMahon when he's on camera. So when I have the conversation with Vince after the day after Vengeance, which we'll get to talking about, and I know we're kind of all over the place, asking people to bear with us. I'll tell you, he gave me 45 minutes at a time, and a lot of it was yelling. I remember saying, who does think you're dead? A child who's, who is, I don't want to say, child facing challenges and the prospect of death. You know who else thinks you're dead? A U.S. service member who lost both her legs. These are people coming up to me asking about you. And he goes, Mick, Vince McMahon didn't die. Mr. McMahon died.
Oh.
And I went, do you think our fans know the difference? He goes, of course they do. And I'm thinking back to where I called him Vince. And clearly I did not know the difference. Like I wasn't aware there was a Vince McMahon and a Mr. McMahon. And when I saw the Full Gospel Tabernacle come in, they were supposed to be celebrating his death. Like you were going to have a certain death service, memorial service. Was it San Antonio or was it, we had the pay-per-view in Houston.
That's right.
So I don't know if we were in San Antonio or Corpus Christi the next day. I think it may have been Corpus Christi. And I was like, I don't know if I demanded that I leave, but it was probably more along the lines of, Nick, if you're not comfortable, you don't have to be here. And so I took off and I missed out on all the tragedy that unfolded as, do you want to go back to vengeance and we'll
get there, but you're all right. It was in Corpus Christi, Texas, the very next day, June 25th. The thing that made me laugh about the Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon thing. Do you recall way back when Hulk Hogan was suing Gawker, there was a discussion.
Yes.
Something he said on the radio.
Okay.
He goes on Bubba the Love Sponge back in the day. Of course, that was a big piece of the story. And
sure,
there's a conversation where he's on the show, the radio show, Shock Jock show. And he says that Hulk Hogan has a certain length piece of male equipment.
Right.
And then when he's quizzed about that on the stand, he has to say, I do not have a certain length piece of equipment. And he says his real name, Terry Bollea's piece of equipment, is not so-and-so size, but Hulk Hogan's is. And it tickled me then, and it tickles me now. Mr. McMahon is dead. Vince McMahon is alive.
Oh, man.
Something that Mr. Bollea maybe doesn't. Amazing.
The closest I can come to that is Mick Foley can't sing. Dude Love can sing. So he's a changing character. That's a little bit different than the piece of equipment. I don't even know how that's physiological and possibly. It's not possible. But that was
how Ric Flair was billed as being 6'2" or 6'1", or he's 5'10" or whatever.
Yeah, I thought he was a 6-footer, wasn't he?
I don't think so. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he went the Mick Foley route and he shrunk a little. I don't know. Okay, guys, I want to give you a quick heads up on something that my wife has been doing for a while now. She got me into it, and now what do you know? We're talking about it on the podcast. I'm talking about AG1 from Athletic Greens. If you want better gut health, maybe you've got some trouble there. Maybe you don't feel like you have enough time to make sure your body's getting all the nutrients it needs. Maybe you're just looking for more energy. Maybe you don't want to get sick and you want to optimize that immune system. Maybe you just hate taking pills or vitamins. But if you're like me, if I'm going to do this, I want it to taste great. AG1 checks all the boxes. I got to tell you, man, with just one delicious scoop of AG1, I know I'm getting 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source ingredients like probiotics, adaptogens, everything you need to start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, your aging, all the things. Seriously, one scoop every single morning, bam, done. I definitely feel better. I know my gut health is better, and you know why, but I just definitely feel better. And I give a lot of credit to that to AG1. By the way, the taste, man, my wife's had me try some pretty rough stuff. This is not one of them. Now I've even got all my friends and family on it. Even my father-in-law is rocking the AG1. I want to mention this is lifestyle friendly too. So even Dallas would approve this. Whether you eat keto or paleo or vegan or dairy free or gluten free, this is the thing for you. It also contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, and it still tastes good. If you're looking to better support your quality sleep and your quality recovery, maybe your mental clarity, your alertness, AG1 can help with all of that. It's almost like nutritional insurance to make sure you don't get sick and you feel better. Why not? Don't take my word for it, or Ric Flair's, or Dallas's, or Mick Foley's. Go check out Athletic Greens' more than 7,000 5-star reviews. And right now it's time to reclaim your health. Arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Foley. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Foley to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. But let's talk about how you find out that they want you for this match. Like, it feels like I totally understand the idea of we're going to do 3 matches a year, and we're kind of almost throw one away with Umaga, but we're trying to make a guy. So, okay. But then this feels a little random when it's compared to what you did with Flair or what you did with Orton or any of that stuff. Who pitches that idea to you? Is this something where Vince calls you and says, "Here's the big idea," or what do you recall of that?
This is probably a Brian Gewirtz call. Brian would usually be the guy to call me. It just struck me as we're talking about this that I was filming a pilot called Wrestling My Family, 2007 pilot for A&E. And we really felt like it was going good. This is pre-Holy Foley. And then it really felt like it was a good show. And the showrunner, who was like the director, Marcus Fox, had been the showrunner for Ozzy's show and Anna Cole's show, which were 2 of the biggest reality shows on TV at that time. And he felt like he had a winner. And after the second day, he says, their only concern is there's not enough conflict in the family. And I said, Marcus, I told them when they pitched this, I said, we're not like those families you yell at each other. And they said, no, we're looking for a new family. That's passe. But I think in a lot of forms of entertainment, when push comes to shove, they want to rely on what has worked before.
Yeah.
And so when they came back for like came back for additional shooting, we went from having nothing scripted, which doesn't mean there weren't produced elements, like, the Foleys are going on a cruise, the older kids are going on a cruise. I've got to hold down the fort, the little cruise with the little kids. I know that's happening. I know we're going to a racetrack. Like, we have to make fun stuff happen. But as far as the dialogue went, no one ever gave us any dialogue. And now when they returned, they've got definite dialogue they want, and they're trying to turn up the conflict factor. And that's where it got a little comfortable for me. Ultimately, the show wasn't picked up. I think it would have done well, though. And it was fun to have our family there, especially when the younger kids were little. I think they were 3 and 5. And we have adorable footage, especially when Huey gets a call from the real Rocky Balboa.
Wow.
The kids turned on to Rocky Balboa like they loved it. Colette and I were getting ready to see the Rocky Balboa movie, which would have been like the 6th Rocky. So we're training for it by watching the original. And the 2 younger boys walk in as Mickey and Rocky are having the heart-to-heart.
Yeah.
And now as an older guy, I get this is not about a fight. It's about a relationship and mending differences and forgiveness. There's a lot going on in that Rocky movie. So they catch the old man, the old lady, tears streaming down their face. They sit in and they become immediate Rocky fans in a way that Dewey and Noel never were. The truth is they've never seen a single Rocky movie. And that becomes our thing, the Rocky thing. He wanted to watch it every single day. And so now this is where being a dad is the best. You go through these phases where the kids don't quite have the mastery of the English language. And Huey and Mickey are referring to bleeding as blood. Blood is a verb. Like, is Apollo Creed going to blood us? Cause us to bleed. So I call up one day to the kids as part of this show, and I do a halfway decent Rocky. Huey and Mickey, this is Rocky Balboa. and I want you to know that I'm going to be coming over tonight, and I'm going to blood you guys a little bit. And so I get a call back from my wife about 10 minutes later. What have you done? The children are now scared. They think Rocky Balboa is going to come over and beat them up. And so I try to leave a message for the kids, letting them know Rocky would never do that. I go, this is your good friend Rocky Balboa, and I just want you to know I would never blood you. I love you guys. And all of a sudden, the phone picks up, and I hear Huey go, Rocky?
Oh my God.
When are you coming over? I said, well, I'm in training for a big fight. I can't go over right now. Can you come over tomorrow? And I said, I start drawing a blank. So hopefully a lot of people know the original Rocky. I just start randomly reciting lines from the book. It's like 88 degrees out, and I'm still going, it's a cold night out here. Good night for a basketball game. But we were able to capture some of these amazing moments with the kids. 2007, I had this great, this really nice contract where I didn't have to do that much, and I was making a pretty respectable living. I was doing a few college speeches here and there, but I hadn't yet embarked on the one-man tour type of thing. So I had time, and I've been doing writing, but I was trying to get into shape, and that was almost impossible because of my back injury. If you look further, pretty much from 2007 through 2012, whenever the last match was, I never actually had a comeback. I had one move. Generally, somebody would miss something, like Kurt Angle would miss a moonsault off the top. I would hit him with a double arm DDT. We'd double down, and out comes a sock. And it was exciting. It's not what you're used to seeing, because almost everybody's comeback these days involves like 6 or 7 ultra cool moves. And I had none of that. But I was just trying to work with what I had, because every time I tried to train for a match, I was just getting further hurt. So that sets the stage for me not being in optimal condition for vengeance. I'm worried about it, but I also realize I've got 4 other guys there to do some of the heavy lifting, and that I'm probably going to be okay if I'm smart and I make sure that whatever I do take part in looks good.
So Brian is the guy who makes the call and makes the pitch?
Yeah. Brian was usually the guy. And he's got an outstanding book out, by the way. Not sure if you guys have heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. It's so good. I got an early copy, and so I could give a blurb. And I read it in 2 sittings, and I must have laughed out loud 15 times. Probably half the laughs came from situations I was on hand for. The other half came situations that I wasn't, but knowing the participants, it's really well written, and it gives the scoop. Some people would say it's expose, but it's also a loving look at the wild and disorganized family that WWE can be.
One of my favorite stories involves, and I won't give a spoiler here, but they ask him if he has an opinion about the way they should, or what they should name the way they would start an XFL football game, where they just sort of have players dive on the ball and whoever gets it wins it. There were lots of suggestions. Michael Hayes had a pretty good one, ball or nothing. And Brian had 2 really good ones. And I won't spoil it. I can't give a spoiler because I laughed so hard, Mick, that I snorted, and my wife thought I needed to be checked on because it's so far out of left field. Either way, here's what Mick and I know for sure. You're going to love There's Just One Problem, True Tales from the former one-time 7th most powerful person in WWE. Seriously, just go to Amazon, look up Brian Gewirtz, as Michael Hayes would say it, Gewirtz. There's Just One Problem. Go check it out. Fantastic book.
Yeah, Becky Lynch loves it. Becky's working on a memoir of her own. I'm kind of providing a little bit of counsel there for her. I have to tell you, I'm on the inside reading the chapters. And I said, listen, I will, I don't know if you knew this, when Jericho's book was about to come out, his first book. He said, hey, can you give me a blurb? You don't have to read it. This first book came out, 7-8 years ago?
Something like
I
that.
can't remember. Yeah, it's been a while. I said, well, Chris, like, going to personal pride, like I won't blurb something I haven't read. So I start reading and I realize, oh man, he's got something good here, but it could be better. And I said, hey, Chris, you want, I can go over some of this. I've got some suggestions. So over the course of about 9 hours, and you can check with him, we went over every single page and I probably had 200 suggestions. And it wasn't like I was trying to turn it into my book. It was just like, okay, now that you're taking us to Owen's memorial service, now is probably not the time for that, like a self, not defacing, but help me out with the word here. I'm looking for some kind of, the joke.
Self-deprecating humor.
Yeah, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
And little things like when a hockey enforcer catches Chris like kind of looking at his bag on a flight and threatens to beat him up. I go, Chris, all right, I get this guy's a tough guy, right? He's fought people. I said, but you're selling Bruiser Bedlam less than you are this guy. This guy has hurt people and punched people. Bruiser Bedlam's killed people. Like, you need to play up the personal, the danger involved in calling Bruiser Bedlam out and not actually washing the dishes, but just rubbing them with a cloth. And so he would go back, and after we were done, if I had 200 suggestions, he probably went with 185 of them. And he had an editor. And the editor goes, hey, I just know, she didn't want to say, hey, you did a great job. She thanked me. She said, oh, I just thought that's the way he wanted to come across. And I said, I rarely drop the F-bombs, right?
Right.
But when he told me a story about approaching Dynamite Kid in a bar in Edmonton, he comes up, Chris is probably 10, 12 years old. He got a piece of paper, and Dynamite looks at him and goes, don't even fucking think about it. And Chris goes running out of the bar. And so when he writes the story, he writes it, don't even effing think about it. I said, Chris, what makes the story great is your emphasis on the words and his accent. Yeah. That's what puts you in that place. So it's all these little things. And I guess in that way, I'm like Mickey Goldmill, Rocky's trainer. Like, I've got pain and I've got experience. I want to give it to you, kid. And if I can help make someone's book better, not make it my book, but just make it better through what I've learned, then I'll do that. So I'm going to be on Team Becky, and I will. She's really open to suggestions, and I really love the idea of helping a friend. Because my memoir is about as personal a project as you could possibly have. You're putting your life story out there. People are not receptive to it. You take that stuff personally. And so I want it to be the best it can be. And the 8 or 9 chapters I've read are really good. She's just at a point where she's questioning herself. And I said, I'll come on up there to the Rollins Lynch compound, and we'll spend some time going over this thing, and we'll make sure it's as good as it can be.
Oh man, just the salt of the earth. Good on you, dude. Everybody. Today's episode is brought to you by Carshield, who makes it easy and affordable to protect my car from expensive repairs. And that's just for starters. Carshield is the #1 auto protection company in the U.S. and offers protection plans for around $100 a month. The plans cover more parts than ever before, whether your car has 5,000 miles or 150,000 miles. And let me tell you how simple it is to get your car fixed. When you need a repair, you choose the mechanic, and Carshield's administrators handle the rest. That's it. You don't have to deal with the paperwork or headaches. You're taken care of. Same goes if your car breaks down and you're stuck on the side of the road. Plans through Carshield also include coast-to-coast roadside assistance. Carshield administrators are there for you with rental car options and trip reimbursement at no extra cost, too. Get coverage today, and you'll lock in your price now, and it will never go up. That means as long as you own your car, no matter how old it is, you're protected from the rising cost of parts and repairs for your vehicle. Carshield helps protect my wallet from expensive car repairs, and they'll do the same for you. Go to carshield.com/podcast to start your plan and lock in your pricing forever. That's carshield.com/podcast. A deductible may apply. The Vengeance show here is subtitled Night of Champions before it becomes its own pay-per-view the following year.
Right.
And on the Raw where you returned, they set it up by saying anyone still on the Raw roster at the end of the night who was a current or former world champion would be eligible for an open WWE Championship match at Vengeance. Of course, you come out, announce yourself for the match. So that's kind of weird in hindsight.
Man, yeah, it is. It is a little strange. The line that resonated with me is, does he have any real friends?
Yeah.
Because I'd always been told, like, he's, so busy and immersed in work. He doesn't have any hobbies. Work is his hobby. So I have to believe he's, it's a tough transition. I'm sure he sees his grandchildren all the time. I'm lucky that I'll be one of the hosts of the new season of Most Wanted Treasures. I don't even know if I'm allowed to announce that, but me, Lita, and Booker are going to be hosting that show. And because my mom only lives an hour and a half away from Stamford, where some of the shooting is done at the warehouse, I'll reach out to Vince and see if he wants to get together for a lunch or something. And I'd like to keep in touch with him. He wasn't a perfect man, but man, Conrad, without Vince's belief in me, we're not doing this podcast, right?
Right.
Like no one's doing a podcast with me based on having a fairly good run from 91 to 94 in WCW. So I owe a lot to Vince. He wasn't a perfect man. I still maintain he was a great man with a couple of flaws. And so it's really interesting to look at that. And it's interesting to see how often I was referring to him as Vince McMahon, not knowing that by that point he wanted to be Mr. McMahon exclusively.
So when the show goes off the air, Vince McMahon has been blown up. And as we said, it creates, a reaction unlike any before. There's a famous story that Donald Trump even called the office about it. And the next week in Richmond, Virginia, this is where the Umaga squash happens. You open the show and do an insincere promo saying, boy, in hindsight, with Vince being dead and all, my comments last week kind of came off kind of bad. And then here comes Randy Orton. What do you remember about this?
Nothing. I don't remember that at all. Because I think because I was so upset about the Vince thing, that these other anything past that is not something I would have committed to memory.
Well, what happens is Coachman comes out, announces it's going to be Cena and Lashley versus Booker and Orton as the main event. And Foley and Umaga, because Vince didn't like Foley and he admired Umaga. And here we go. Meltzer would say this: Foley versus Umaga was supposed to be Foley's first singles match on Raw in 7 years, but it technically never got started. They brawled outside the ring. Foley clocked Umaga with a chair shot to the head, which Umaga barely sold. Umaga then super kicked the chair into Foley's face and did the running hip attack to Foley, knocking his head into the ring steps, and Foley sold the KO, and they had the ref call it off before it even started. This was one of those educational knockout endings with Foley being all glassy-eyed. To me, it doesn't make sense to do that to a guy who was in line for a title main event on the final show before the pay-per-view, to lay out a babyface challenger by someone who isn't even a participant in the title match. That is, unless Umaga will somehow play a part in Foley's story at the pay-per-view. I guess we'll see, but at the moment, it sure did come off strange, particularly because the first thing you did was question whether or not Foley would be injured and out of the match. It was addressed later with Lawler saying that he expected Foley would be there, but no definitive word was given before the show went off the air. We'll talk about the silliness of the booking in a minute.
Yeah.
So, Umaga gone way too soon. Another super talented performer we have to talk about in past tense. What'd you think of working with Umaga?
Well, it wasn't that I minded working with him. I minded working with him that close to the show in something that didn't benefit the main event at all. That match would not have counted towards my 3. That was kind of like a bonus thing. I would go through these phases where, like, you got to, figure out which hills you're going to die on, be willing to die on. The Umaga match was not one that I was willing to die on. The Vince angle where he was blown up, that was one that I would, that's a hill I was willing to climb and die on because I just felt really strongly about that. So if you can't come in with 2 arguments. You've got to keep it, I guess technically you can. I just feel for the more effective argument, you keep it limited to 1, which is this, which I thought was like a tasteless and confusing angle that had led a decent portion of our audience to believe that Mr. McMahon had died. And I just didn't think that was territory we should be crossing with our show. We're supposed to take people's minds off their problems. I guess in some ways we do create new problems by having our characters who they have emotional investments in get themselves in situations. But, you love that. You love to watch a good TV show. I think that's different than feeling and being led to believe through really believable pyrotechnics that the owner of WWE has perished. So I just, I was more concerned with that. And I did not like the idea that, I lost this match so quickly, only because it had nothing to do with it, only because it not only did it have nothing to do with the main event match, but that it hurt the match in the sense that it gave fans even less of an idea that I had a chance to win that thing. And I think when you get out there in the best case scenario, it's like any man can win at any time. And we've just seen one of the participants squashed, as Meltzer said, first Raw match in 7 years. Not a great way to make a statement.
Unfortunately, since we're speaking of, an angle where someone passes away, the real life Sherri Martel lost her life on June 15th. I'm not sure. Did you guys spend any time together in WCW? Were y'all just passing? Did you get to know Sherri at all?
I did get to know Sherri, and I'll tell you what, my first time I met her, it made such an impression on me because I was on the independent scene, and there was a real talented Long Island worker named Lou Fabiano who became a buddy of mine. This is after I left DiNucci School. I was always part of DiNucci School, but I was getting bookings on the weekends. Once I finished college, I was no longer 7 hours away. I was 9 hours away back in the days of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And it just didn't make sense for me to be driving out to Pittsburgh when I was getting booked, I almost every weekend. So Louis took me to a WWE show back when they would run 3 shows a night, and there'd be an A crew, a B crew, and a C crew. C crew ran high school gymnasiums, and they would have a handful of stars, but there'd be some local people on there, and it wasn't the A card, which had Hogan on it in the bigger arenas. And he was like, "Hey, I wanted you." Louis like, "I don't do a good Louis Fabiano." If you can think of an Italian guy from Long Island, that's Louis Fabiano, who later went on. He worked for Continental Championship Wrestling as the New York Thug, not the Brooklyn Brawler, the New York Thug. And then he also worked Puerto Rico quite a bit. Even though he's Italian, he was a Middle Eastern terrorist in Puerto Rico, only in wrestling, right? But he said he wanted to go to the show. He wanted to see Sherri Martel because they'd worked a couple of independent tours. And I'm thinking, Sherri Martel's a top flight talent. Lou is an enhancement guy from Long Island on the indie scene. And he knocks on the door, says, "Hey, can you tell Sherri that Lou Fabiano is out here?" And I don't expect anything. About 30 seconds later, that door opens up, and she's just, for those who knew her, she was such a charming, kind-hearted. She had that like infectious excitement. And she came out, she went, "Louie," and like wrapped him up in a big hug. And then he said, "Hey, this is my friend Cactus Jack." And she gave, "Oh, are you a friend of Louie? He's a friend of mine." And that was my introduction to Sherri. So she was always nice, always sweet. I'd heard rumblings that she, not just rumblings, I'd seen her when she was, taking too much in the way of pills. For someone who could be so, infectiously excited. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Whose excitement could be infectious. She could also get down pretty easily. I don't know if she was ever diagnosed with depression, but it seemed to me like she did go from high to lows during the time I knew her. But I saw her in action a lot. I think the high point for her was, as Shawn Michaels second, and then as Randy Orton second. But the stuff she did in WCW was excellent as well. And she was a wonderful person to have in the dressing room. Things weren't always going good in WCW. And so it was good to have somebody who was so positive there, put smiles on your faces. She was a great lady. I really liked her. I did not know her that well, but I knew her enough to consider her a friend.
Such a talented lady. I think it's a shame that more people don't talk about her now. I mean, I'm glad she got to go into the Hall of Fame and get her moment.
Yeah.
Man, imagine how much fun she would be having with women's wrestling being much differently now.
Yeah.
Wooooo Wings, a virtual restaurant concept from the man himself, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Enjoy the legendary flavors and World Championship wings by ordering with your Uber Eats or Postmates app. Wooooo Wings is now open in Nashville, San Antonio, Jacksonville, Florida, as well as Huntsville and Tuscaloosa in Alabama, with many more locations coming soon. Try the only chicken wings worthy of carrying the name of the 16-time World Heavyweight Champion. Tell him, Nate.
Wings! Legendary flavors, World Championship wings! Woo! Woo wings! Yeah! Woo woo!
Let's talk about the unfortunate circumstance here. The elephant in the room, if you will. There's a now infamous ECW title match that's supposed to happen on this pay-per-view between Johnny Nitro and CM Punk, which Nitro won. And of course, that's not the original plan. Chris Benoit was supposed to be here. He doesn't show up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks think that's way out of character for him to miss a show, and apparently like no show, no call. And right. I think people probably started to assume that there was some sort of an accident or what have you. What do you remember first hearing backstage about, hey man, where's Chris?
It was just that rumbling. We didn't know where he was. And so at that point, I had quite a bit of seniority. So when I spoke, people tend to listen. I remember saying, one thing's for sure. If Chris Benoit is not at a pay-per-view, something's wrong, like something major. I was thinking health problem, that he had some type of health problem, but he was not the type of guy who would miss a match at all. Now the next day after that talk with Mr. McMahon, still no sign of Chris Benoit, but Vince understands how I'm offended by that angle, and he sends you don't want to be part of it, go home. So he sent me home. And on that night, there was just awful weather throughout the Southeast and the Southwest. Flights were being canceled and delayed. So I'm sitting in the Corpus Christi airport. I'm trying to think, this is 2007. The internet was around, but I didn't have access to it. I would not have had a tablet or anything like that. I probably just had a flip phone, but I start hearing rumblings. Maybe it's from local news that there's been this tragedy, and I can't get more information. And because my flight is delayed and I've been rerouted, and it's one of those situations where you end up in Atlanta 4 hours after you're supposed to be there. Atlanta is such an enormous hub that when a weather condition hits like that, everyone's scampering for the hotel rooms, and I end up in, it's bad even by my standards, dangerous place to be, a lot of action going on in the parking lot. Like one of these hotels you would see in the movie The Florida Project, where people are there for extended times. There's, a variety of improprieties going on before your very eyes. And it's sinking in that this person I've known and respected for a long time, Chris Benoit, and even more so, Nancy, who I'd known since 1990. They're not with us anymore. And I'm devastated. By the next day, it was by the next day, the realization has come that this wasn't a break-in, that this was something more complex. I start getting those phone calls from the different outlets, and I'm not ready to talk about it yet. But when I get home, I'd say by the time I got home, I was already down in the sense that, a depression had snuck in that would stick around for a while, because I'd always been such a proud, not just advocate, but kind of representative of wrestling, and always stood up for it. And this was something that just devastated us, because it asked us to defend the indefensible in the aftermath of the deaths and suicides. I think the only guy who came across well was Chris Jericho, because Chris was wise enough to understand that nobody gains from a shouting match.
Yeah.
And he said he would only be on if he was the only guest. That's the only way you really make your points. Otherwise, I've been on those situations, where you go to like CNN and it's you and 3 professional panelists, and they all have to get their stuff in. And you're kind of depending on the person running the show to ask you a question so that you can talk. But other than that, you got to butt in. And like I said, you're dealing with 3 people who are doing that as a living. It's really uncomfortable. They had a lot of misinformation out there. Everyone wanted to go with the roid rage thing. I remember Chris Jericho, Chris, real smart guy. He says he reads off a list of effects. And jittery, and there's a bunch of them: jittery, uptight, prone to frustration, blah blah blah. He reads it off, and then the woman goes, "Well, this just goes to show what the steroids can do." And Chris said, "I just read you the effects of too much caffeine," and he had a way of putting things in perspective, like. We all jump out. It's a shame that news is it revolves around the ratings. So it's entertainment. It's not so much news. When I was growing up, the news was a lost leader. It wasn't there to make money. It was there as a public service. And then you have guys trying to outdo each other on different networks. So for that week, it was a free for all, and I didn't want any part of it. I remember I'd been approached by the Bill O'Reilly show, and I was going to do it. And it was actually one of the representatives from Child Fund International who said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I think Bill would treat me well." And she said, "You've done a lot of good work in the world. I don't think you should trust that this one guy is going to do the right thing for you." And I went, "All right, yeah, that's a valid point." And I didn't talk about it. One thing I was really, when I say I was struggling, I think a lot of us in the industry were struggling in the aftermath of that tragedy. Our personal appearances were cut down dramatically. Nobody wanted to book a pro wrestler for a period of time. And the few things I did do, I remember going to Six Flags over Texas, and you just feel like every eyeball is upon you, like, oh, you're one of those guys. Looking back, Conrad, after Eddie Guerrero's death, all of us were sad, but Chris was devastated. There's that clip of him, and he's bawling his eyes out. And so I thought, the writing side of me might try to understand it and write a fictitious, but in a sense, historically, inspired book called Letters to Eddie, in which you see a human being losing his grip on reality. and succumbing to his demons through his own words. And I never followed through with that. I think it would have been really interesting, but I have no doubt. And I don't want to say I don't have any doubt, but it would not surprise me. And I think I'm almost sure that Eddie's death played so heavily on Chris's mind, having lost his very best friend, that he was never quite the same. You compound that with the style he had that was relentless. He wasn't one of those guys who changed gears as he got older, learned how to make audiences laugh, learned to connect in another way. He never did that. He was just going to give you everything he had, every single match. And he was, you don't come back after neck surgery and still drop the headbutt off the top rope. You don't do that. I wish somebody had pulled him aside and said, you got a lot of moves. You got to come up with something different. I don't care if Tommy Billington did it or not. You need to stop coming off the top rope with a surgically repaired neck. But some of these guys, they push themselves so hard. I believe Chris, who was always, small by wrestling standards, continued to use, enhancers even while he was recovering from his neck surgery. So it was sad. It was really sad. He was an intense guy by nature anyway. I think he was greatly affected by the loss of his friend. I do not know what was going on behind the scenes in his marriage. I mean, I've never found out for sure if Daniel had Fragile X syndrome. I don't know what the situation was. I just know it was tragic and one of the worst things that's ever happened to us. And it really set WWE and wrestling back a ways because it came across so negatively in the media.
And man, the loss of life for Nancy and her son Daniel just can't be overstated. There's nothing we can say that will make that better, but golly, what a senseless tragedy. But I do want to ask, and man, this is awkward to bring up, but we didn't know what we know now back then about head trauma. And back in my day, people used to say, "Oh, it was bell rung," and that was sort of it. And now we've learned and we've gotten better, and I'm thankful for that. But when you're getting, to try to process all of this, and I think a lot of people, don't want to hear that maybe CTE was a part of this, and think that that's a cop out or an excuse. And I certainly understand it, but CTE did become a topic during this era, and Chris Benoit did become one of those examples. And with what we know about concussions, well, pal, you've had a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Start to get into your mind like, man, I don't know what happened with Chris, but if we kind of shared the same experience in the ring, that has to be a little scary, right, man?
It is. It is. And, we're talking about doing this benefit for Steve Mongo McMichael.
Yes, sir.
In the beginning of September. And you asked me, like, how quickly was I on that? Like,
immediately.
Affirmative. Oh, I'll be there. I don't care if I have to spend next day in Chicago. I mean, I was a huge Bears fan from the time 1969. I had a Dick Butkus poster hanging over my bed, and he finally signed it like 25 years later, which is a good story for another time. But I love the Bears. I remember when Deborah was my assistant, I told her, I said, yeah, I was a big Bears fan. I said, I bet you I could still rattle off 10 names from the 86 Super Bowl team. And she went, really? And I went, boom, 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 and had them all. And so here's Mongo, who was just not just larger than life in that he was a 275-pound monster of a man, but lived life with a gleam in his eye. And he looks like he's down below 100 pounds. It's heartbreaking. You can still see the light in his eye. And you can't prove that it was the concussions, but there's definitely a link between football and pro wrestling and early onset ALS. Conrad, I went as a guest to Chris Nowinski's to the gala for the Boston Center for Traumatic Encephalopathy. I think it's called Concussion Legacy Institute now, but I figure as long as I can continue to say Boston Institute for Traumatic Encephalopathy, I'll be okay.
Yep.
But there was a running back who was in a wheelchair with early onset ALS, and he said, it's the same thing that you did. He said, back in my day, they said, you got your bell rung.
Yeah.
You got a dinger. And he said, if instead of being told I had my bell rung or I got a dinger, if my coach had looked me in the eye and said, you have just suffered a traumatic brain injury, he said, I might not be in this chair.
Wow.
Because we really downplayed head injuries. Guys who did not wrestle with head injuries were looked down upon. We had the benefit, like when I had a concussion, I could say, hey, listen, man, don't hit me in the head today. Let's go after my knee. That's something we could do. But really what we should have been doing is taking 10 days off or 8 days off. But you just did not do that at the time. We learned so much, right? Like going back to the cell match, I'll say during my shows, hey, we've learned a lot. And if the same situation presented itself in 2022, that match should be stopped.
Yes.
And I'd say, luckily for me, in a weird way, it wasn't, because had that cell match been stopped, it would have trended. Now, let's just say this was a new match. It would have trended for 2 days and then been forgotten. Yeah. And instead, because of the actions of the survivors, meaning me and The Undertaker and Terry Funk as well, it was like a snowball going downhill, gathering momentum. But the line I use, and you've been at the show when I use this one, it's like, we didn't stop matches. We bought time.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that, but it's also like living in the dark ages, we don't buy time these days. We stop matches and we don't worry about the match that day. We worry about the next, 30, 40 years of that participant's life. So we have learned a lot. I know that the CTE diagnosis has been really helpful to Chris's dad. I have to feel like something went wrong in there because he was such a humble, nice guy, very intense, very difficult on himself. But, I don't remember many people having a cross word with Chris. He was very highly thought of. I could not call him a good friend, because he was one of the guys that I went, hey, Chris, how you doing? Family good? And you think, you go through that same routine and you realize that other than the 2 times we traveled, we never really had a big conversation. But it was always pleasant, and especially when Nancy was there with his kid, with this boy, Daniel, I'd gather around and spend a little extra time because Nancy and I, had the friendship going back to 1990, 89, actually, when I joined WCW. So I'm still skeptical as to whether anybody, no matter their brain condition, would have it in them to pick up a gun and kill someone they love. I don't know. That's a step beyond. I'd say it probably would not have happened had he not had the brain injuries, but I don't think you can blame it on the brain injuries alone, if that makes sense.
I don't think we need to give him a pass. I would like to talk about Nancy Sullivan. Any fun or interesting Nancy Sullivan stories you can share with us? I don't think we celebrate her nearly enough.
No, we don't. And I wrote an article about her a couple of years ago. I don't do it nearly as frequently as I used to. But every once in a while I'll sit down and I'll write an article that takes 3 or 4 hours. And those are the articles I'm proudest of. They're not the articles that get the widest readership, because if you want people to react to stuff you put up a funny meme or you put up a photo with a 1-sentence description. But sometimes I like to take the deep dive, and I did that with Nancy. And I brought up the fact that when I met her, she was a woman, Kevin Sullivan's wife, and she was managing Doom, Ron Simmons, and Butch Reed, and she was much higher on the card than I was. I was Kevin's project, Sullivan Slaughterhouse. But I'll tell you what, Conrad, I've been around a long time. I know when I'm being blown off. I know when someone's not interested in talking to me at the least. And I never got that from Nancy. Actually, I got the antithesis. She was always all smiles. Like I remember her writing like in a notebook, almost like she was a middle schooler, like Nancy loves Kevin. Like they were a really happy couple together. It's crazy they suffered that wrestling. What is it? They worked themselves into a shoot.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, crazy. You don't ever I think if a booker approaches you about having a real life, an angle with your real life spouse, just go, I've seen the documentation on this. I'm not going to fall into that trap. But after she left WCW, she was a regular in ECW, and she was great there. I worked with her a lot because she was Sandman's second, and I had the feud with Sandman. And I think people forget just how hot, when I say hot, I'm talking about the crowds in Florida. Yeah. These are people who believed. And if they didn't believe in all of it, they believed in Kevin Sullivan, that he was the devil incarnate. So when this woman comes off and joins forces, like you're putting your life on the line in some of those small Florida towns, and they welcomed that type of heat. So I think when you put together the work she did as Fallen Angel in Florida, the work she did as a woman with the incredible transformation, this is going back to like 88, where Rick Steiner was on his first date with this cute, girl with the pigtails and the horn rim glasses. And then before his eyes, she transforms into a woman. It was really great TV. I think when you put all those things together, the 3 different runs she's had, that she's really deserving of more recognition, and maybe the holy grail is the WWE Hall of Fame. I think eventually it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, though.
Just because of the optics of, the negative connotation it would bring about with fans.
I think on the heels of Chyna's induction, I'm overjoyed that Joni was inducted, but I don't think you want consecutive, and that may have been 2 years ago. I may not be mixing up my years. I'm not sure if you want consecutive or even
tragedies.
Female tragedies. I think you want to give those a few years. When it's tough when you induct someone posthumously, and the deaths are not by natural causes. I think you got to space them out a little bit.
Listen, it's an awkward conversation to have, but I hope people will take a little time today and go celebrate some Nancy stuff. We're talking about stuff. Go watch some of her stuff in ECW and WCW, and really, really fun stuff with her. And let's, as silly as it sounds, try to talk about wrestling a little bit now. Speaking of but I feel strongly that saving money is important. If it's not something we worry about now, boy, we are really going to worry about it later. And I want to help you get out of debt faster and do it with cheaper monthly payments. I'm talking to you if you're in a 30-year loan. Now is the time to take years off of your loan. We're routinely helping our listeners cut 5, 10, even 15 years off their loan. And you can do this without perfect credit, with no money out of pocket. You've just got to start at SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little bit about AdFreeShows.com. People often ask me, what exactly is Ad-Free Shows all about? Well, I'm glad you asked. Not only do you get early ad-free access to all of my podcasts starting at just $9, but you also get many of your other favorite wrestling podcasts, like Click This with Kevin Nash, Gentleman Villain with William Regal, Oh You Didn't Know with Brian James, and others for, yes, still just $9 a month. That's 14 podcasts in total every single week, early with no ads. That's like 20 cents an episode. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or through your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Want some more cheese on that Whopper? AdFreeShows.com has literally tens of thousands of hours worth of bonus content, including fantastically popular series like Eric Fires Back, Title Chase, and Strictly Business. And I don't know why this is a thing, but there's even more than 40 Ask Conrad episodes waiting for you at AdFreeShows.com. We've got monthly Zoom chats with all the podcast hosts, live watch-alongs with wrestling legends, and more. Come on now. See for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans have already discovered. That's adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling today. Check it out right now. Adfreeshows.com. You'll be glad you did. Umaga, who just beat the shit out of you earlier, is going to lose to Santino in 2.5 minutes by DQ, which really makes this whole thing that happened with you and Raw an even bigger head scratcher, right?
I don't know. Maybe I'd rubbed somebody the wrong way back then. I do know going in. I want to give a lot of credit to Booker T. Booker at that time and throughout his career, he's experimented with promo styles, the accents, the King Booker. And then when he went to TNA, he developed like an African king. I remember AJ Styles is only fit to, clean up dog horse poop or so. He would try things.
Yeah.
And in this case, I remember him giving a promo and he wasn't really doing the King Booker accent. He's like, how much do we actually know about this Lashley?
Yeah, great.
We know he's an expert with munitions. There was some mystery. I can't remember what happened. And he's cutting a promo on Lashley. And I'm in the ring trying not to laugh because Booker is so entertaining and can be so it can be tough to keep a straight face around. So we're trying to make this match make sense instead of just 5 guys jumbled together. And even when it was being laid out, by that time, the matches were more thoroughly laid out by producers. I remember thinking, I don't think there's enough stuff in here. I knew that the WWE had set the bar really high for 3-way dances and 4-ways. And here we have this 5-way. And there's a meeting and they lay out some stuff, all of which sounds good. And it's like, okay, sounds good. I may have even said, like, this doesn't feel like it's long enough. And they went, no, we're good. And if you go back, I believe it was only about an 11-minute 5-way match. Lucky for me, I didn't have to have a great endurance. I will go back. This is not me picking or knocking on Booker T because things happen. I do know that the next day I was, despite being angry at Vince and being sent home to compound everything I was going through with the news of the Benoit tragedy becoming apparent, I was also kind of reeling and lightheaded from what I judged to be a concussion. And when I got home a couple days later, I see the Raw show and they have not a super slow-mo, but a slow-mo, a Booker T's super kick on me. At the moment I see it land, I was like, that's why I'm lightheaded. And so Booker T and I joked about it a little bit later, and he tried saying that I send the forearms in a little hard in the corner. And then he kind of laughed. He goes, okay, man, I really did send that one in a little too hard. Not by design, but just sometimes those things happen. But I was relieved to see, okay, there's a reason for it. When I started running into trouble when I was in TNA, I stopped seeing the reasons behind the concussions. And that's when I should have just said, I'm calling it a day because it no longer takes much to hurt me. At least I could justify continuing on because that was that made some serious impact. I know we have the footage somewhere, so hopefully you can find it. Okay, let's see it. Okay, here we go. Now watch this kick. Boom, watch my jaw. Bam! Yeah.
Back and to the left.
Back and to the left. There we go.
This is the key shot. President going back and to his left.
Back
Boom.
to the left.
Back and to the left.
I mean, that's a pretty legit kick there.
Yeah, so that had me dazed and confused. Great performer, great super kick, and that one just, it's a little, not intentional, but just jolted the jaw a little bit.
Let's talk about the match here. It is a main event. It's a big deal to be in the main event. The show does 255,000 buys on pay-per-view. It's the third highest of the year at this point, behind the Rumble and Mania.
Really?
It beat SummerSlam, dude, which I can't believe.
Whoa.
And to your point, it's not a long match. And again, to remind everybody, it's John Cena, the WWE champion, defending against Mick Foley, Randy Orton, King Booker, and Bobby Lashley. And it goes 10 minutes and 7 seconds. And Meltzer would say, real good match, easily the best on the show. Is Mrs. Foley's baby boy okay?
Yeah, my my beauty supply. I was looking for a bottle of water, but they're all empty. And then a couple things.
Bladder's working overtime today. You've chugged quite a bit of water since you've been up.
You got to stay hydrated when you're in another country.
So generally speaking, when WWE ends its pay-per-view shows 20 minutes before the 3-hour mark, and in most cases they're shorter than anyone else who does pay-per-view, the great champion from the past here was JBL, and the ring announcer Justin Roberts ran a hilarious acceptance speech. JBL got his radio show plugged, his Fox News channel appearances plugged, and they talk about how he grew up dirt poor, just like every son of a successful banker, and the match was all action. Now, they tried to build a few spots for Cena Lashley, since at the time that's what they were building for the next pay-per-view, but it wasn't one of those blood and guts crazy performances for Foley, since he was not the focal point, but he did fine. The big spot of the match was Cena giving Lashley the FU through the ECW announcer's table. Booker gave Cena the axe kick, but Orton saved. Orton gave Cena the RKO, but Foley saved. And the place had a big baby face pop when Orton used the move on Cena. Foley hit the double arm DDT on Orton and pulled out Mr. Sacco. However, Booker super kicked Foley, and the finish of the match saw Orton give Foley a field goal kick, and then Lashley speared Orton. Cena then pinned Foley after an FU, 3.5 stars. So, hey, man, not a bad gig if you can get it. You're going to get great money for 3 matches a year, and it's a 10-minute match. Hey,
and I'm only in it for 3 of those minutes. So,
could have been worse.
And I'm resting intermittently, between those 3 minutes. Like I said, I felt like it was good, but I on paper, you're not giving yourself a chance to have that classic match just by the way it was booked. But when I brought it up to 2 or 3 people who had been around more regularly than me, said, "No, sounds good to me." And I went, "Okay," and I was happy with it. The day before, this is an interesting little tidbit, because the show was in Houston, I was in Mexico attending the grand opening of a early education, childhood early education center that I had helped fund along with the Dalai Lama.
Oh my God.
So you talk about a tag team, brother. And the only thing I was hot about is they put his name first. And I know for a fact, Conrad, I donated more money than Dalai Lama did. So
who'd he ever beat?
Come on. And they actually misspelled my name too. But it was a really cool thing. I got to meet one of the children that I sponsored, and it was a nice, I was in a cool looking, like, white, crisp linen jacket. And I was about 300 even at the time, which is where I looked okay. I looked okay. I looked like a large man, but, like now I'm well over that. So I have to slim down at some point, get back into the good habits. But it was a really fun day. I was able to make it back to Houston that night. Had that good, match I was happy with. And at that point, unlike other times in my career where I didn't feel like I'd earned my money unless I was practically like crawling down the hallway, I was okay with I'd put it all out there in 2004 at Backlash. I'd put it all out there against Edge at Mania in 2006. We had the match with me, Edge, and Lita against Funk, Tommy, and Tommy Dreamer's wife. That was a wild and woolly affair. And then Rick and I had a real wild and bloody confrontation in a SummerSlam. So I was okay, like, just being a role player in this one. Title match. I hadn't been in a title match in a long time that I could recall. And I knew it was good. I knew it wasn't classic, but it was a pretty good accounting of myself. And I said earlier, played to my strengths, avoided my weaknesses so that I wasn't like a glaring hole in that match. And I was happy with it until the events of the next day.
Said real good match, easily the best of the show. But he thought maybe it was disappointing because it was the same as you. But still, 3.5 stars, maybe with more time would have been a bigger deal. But you had a lot of stars in there, and some of these folks are still doing big things now. I mean, look at the run Bobby Lashley's been on.
Oh, great.
Later, still at the top of his game. That dude is ageless, is he not?
Yeah, I think he looks younger. Yeah. He's found the fountain of youth. He must know the Ponce de Leon descendants, because he's found that fountain of youth. He's taken
Benjamin Button of wrestling. Getting younger. And he's coming off the big WrestleMania appearance with Donald Trump. You had the history with Randy Orton. King Booker is obviously a Hall of Famer. And John Cena, man, the franchise. And just to be rubbing up against those guys and being well received and hearing the crowd has to feel pretty good. But in the back of your mind, there is this, hey, what's going on with Chris thing? And then it all changes the next day. Of course, originally it was hyped as a federal investigation to continue the Vince McMahon death storyline. But once we understand that the Benoit family is no longer with us, the whole show changed into a Chris Benoit memorial show instead. And just to remind everybody, we didn't know the circumstances at the time.
Right.
WWE wishes they had that one back. But as the legend goes, at some point during the show, people started to suspect, wait, maybe there was more to it than this. And listen, we've beat that up. I don't think we necessarily have to talk about it anymore, but it's something that no one will really be able to discuss in a proper way, I think, for Nancy and Daniel. I don't know, wrestling fans really just gravitate to talking about Benoit, and I understand that, but hey, woman did her thing too. And Daniel was a kid, and I don't know, man, there's no way to sort of put a bow on this. I'm just rambling at this point.
Yeah, I had a situation when I was in Bloomington, Indiana, my birthplace, and they've got a great club there called the Comedy Attic. And there was a guy sitting front row to the left of the stage wearing a shirt that says, "I'm a Chris Benoit guy." And I said, oh, man, I know it's a free country. You should be able to wear what you want, but I think there's a point. And the point to me is now I can't look at that side of the crowd. So after a while, after about 10 minutes, I go, all right, listen, I got to address something going on. I said, people can wear what they want. I said, but when you're wearing an I'm a Chris Benoit guy shirt, you have to realize he murdered a friend of mine. Now I can't look at this section of the crowd, which hurts the show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to go to the back so I don't have to see you, and therefore I can give these people the show they deserve. And the thing is, he went back. He wasn't mad at me. He was in tears because he couldn't understand why that would upset anybody. And he did not want to make me angry. He wasn't doing it to be a wise ass. And I'm generally pretty good, given that I am an autism dad and I have a son on the spectrum, although he's doing phenomenal. Oh my God. Maybe we'll have him come in and play some guitar on a future show, because the gains this guy has made, it's really inspiring. But I'm really good at picking out people who need a little extra time, and this may have been one of them. So he didn't just bail out and say, screw you. He stuck around for the meet and greet. He did it, and he didn't yell at me. He had tears in his eyes. And I said, I can't remember. I said, you have to understand. And I laid it out to him, that if you're wearing something that distracts and puts me in a situation where I can no longer look at a third of the audience, that hurts the show. And that's why I had to put you back there. And he understood. And I said, I brought up the part about the murder. And then, so to this day, it's unfortunate. Over the past few days in Australia, I signed the Backlash DVD, which actually has Chris on the cover. He had a great match. He always had great matches. But man, wow, just a really, really, really tragic situation that set our business back for a while, because nobody wanted to do business with pro wrestlers for quite a while.
Well, we appreciate you guys checking us out every week here on Foley's Pod. The first one we haven't taped in person.
I know.
as far away as humanly possible. I've never even talked to someone in Australia at the time.
Other side of the globe. My goodness. Do you think it suffered? Honestly?
No, I think this was fun. I had a good time. How about you?
I really enjoyed it. I still like being in there. So we'll do that next week. I'll be in the studio, but I'm so glad we had this opportunity. One of the things you gave me when we first met up and made the commitment to do this, you gave me the portable ring light, which I am using. Let's see what it would look like without the portable ring light. You ready?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, you can't do that. Actually, it doesn't look that bad. Some people probably think it looks better. It doesn't look too bad. But we've got natural sunshine coming in.
We do.
But I've been using these ring lights for my cameos. Bad news is today, because I came in and the time difference, I knocked out the 4 videos that were ready. And I do not have a cameo for you this time around.
Hey, you know what? That's all good. Let me remind everybody, this is not a plug. Definitely not a plug. It's information only. Cameo.com/Mick Foley is where you too can get maybe the best cameo that a wrestling fan can get. Don't take my word for it. My man's got over 4,000 reviews. His average rating is 5 stars. His average is 5 stars. Go check it out. Cameo.com/Mick Foley. And next week, Mick, we're going to be talking SummerSlam 1997. You against Hunter Hearst Helmsley. China's at ringside. We're back doing WWE pay-per-views in New Jersey. It's a big doggone deal. They got the big blue cage, going to get nailed in your head. You're going to tear open the shit, reveal the heart. What a big moment this is in your 1997, and we're going to talk about it.
I can't wait. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I heard from so many people in Australia who are fans. I'm just happy that we're on there, helping put smiles on faces, making days nice, and I will see you in Alabama next week.
Sooner rather than later, and every Friday right here on Foley is Pod with Mick Foley.
Have a nice day.